Larry's favorite comedian is Jerry Clower. And Jerry Clower tells a story that could very well be about Larry Martin. And Tim Kide, see, there's Tim Kide. He knows where this is, in Amite County, Mississippi. Jerry was born and raised in Liberty, Mississippi. There's only 2 general stores in that county. One was on the west side, one was on the east side, on the East Fork School, near the school. And that store was ran by Mr. Duval Scott. The bus drivers, when they would drop off the kids at school, would go play dominoes in Mr. Duval Scott's store. Mr. Duval Scott was a religious man. His kids were named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Ebenezer. Every time Mr. Duval Scott rang up the cash register, he recited a Bible verse. He had a verse for everything, Larry. One rainy morning, bus drivers were in there playing dominoes. A little kid came in, bought penny candy, walked out. Mr. Duval Scott rang up the register and said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." A few minutes later, a grown adult man came in, wanted to buy something for his daddy. He bought him this for his birthday. Later on the counter, Mr. Duval Scott rang up the register and said, "Honor thy father and mother." And after he left, this long van came in with a big old horse trailer behind it. The man comes walking in and he goes, "I need a blanket for my horse." Mr. Duval Scott said, "I got a horse blanket." Went back there on the shelf, brought it up there, and he said, "That'll be $5. The man said, "I can't put a $5 blanket on the horse that I've got in that wagon." He said, "I am headed to the Lead Bonnier Horse Show in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I cannot put a $5 blanket on that horse." Mr. Duval Scott walked back to the shelf. He only had one kind of horse blanket. He just picked another color, brought it back up there later on the counter. "That'd be $25. The man goes, "I don't think you understand. This is a world-renowned horse. I am not putting a $25 blanket on that horse." Mr. Duval Scott walked back to the shelf, grabbed the only other color he had, brought it up to the counter, threw it down there, and he says, "That'll be $50. The man says, "That's more like it." Paid for the blanket, took off, and all the bus drivers leaned in and wondered what Bible verse Duval Scott was fixing to recite. He hit the button on the cash register, moved his lips, looked at heaven, and said, "He was a stranger, and I took him in." I can't quite get there. But I will tell you this. We are blessed to be a part of this class. Larry Martin is the most prepared Bible study teacher. My dad drugged me to church as a kid, and I've been in Bible study ever since. There's no one more prepared to bring God's word to us than Larry Martin. His dedication, consideration, his love for us is evident, and it is always appreciated. Under Larry's teaching, you are always fed the word, and you're fed the meat of the word, because there's no meat left on the bone when he gets through it. But through his teachings, you will know that you are saved. You are able to defend your faith, and you're able to share your faith. So Larry, we thank you. And we thank Duval Scott. Well, Adrian Rogers said that when we ask God, "Teach me your word," that we should look for 5 things: a lesson to learn, a sin to avoid, a blessing to enjoy, a promise to claim, and a new thought. And today, hopefully, we get there. I want to talk to you about Moses. Moses was, outside of Jesus, probably the greatest story we could read in the Bible. Moses was a reluctant leader, but when he became that leader that God wanted him to be, he was awesome. I mean, it was, what does this remind you of? So let it be written, so let it be done. You ever seen Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments? Cecil B. DeMille was one of the premier Hollywood directors. In 1923, he made the 10 Commandments, but it was a silent movie. 1956, he did a remake. Anybody remember who was in that movie? That was Charlton Heston. Anytime you picture Moses in your mind, you picture Charlton Heston.
Yul Brynner.
Yul Brynner. That was, bring Moses to me. The man did 500 sit-ups a day when he knew he got that part. And Yul Brynner he performed The King and I 4,500 times live on stage. So we don't have actors like that anymore. Bigger than life. Lily Munster was in the 10 Commandments. She played Moses' wife, Zipporah. Edward G. Robinson. You remember, he was a G-man in most of his movies, either that or a gangster. Yeah, that's it. He's out there, in the desert with Moses. Where's you got now? And so just an epic movie. And Charlton Heston played Moses. It was just incredible. He was, bronze, chiseled. he was, Moses may not have been that way, but anyway, I want to start out. If you look at Stephen's, if someone could turn to Acts chapter 7, verse 20. If someone would like to read those. Okay.
22 what?
Go to 22 for now.
At that time Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. For 3 months he was cared for by his family. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action.
Thank you. Moses was a beautiful baby. His mom recognized that. You go back to Exodus, and Moses doesn't write a lot about that childhood because it goes right into the meat of Exodus. Jochebed was his mother. She saw, and his dad, that Moses was a beautiful baby. Preachers have to, I don't know if they have to lie, but everybody's got the most beautiful baby that was ever born. My grandson was the most beautiful kid I've ever seen. I knew I was not. My dad knew I was not. My dad carried around a picture of the kid that came with the wallet. So Dad didn't want to make his preacher lie. But I think when we start talking about Moses and how God starts working in his life and how Jochebed and saving Moses' life, I think we have to go back to the 3rd chapter of Genesis, because the Bible points us to Jesus Christ in every book of the Bible. And you look in Genesis chapter 3, in the garden, the fall has happened, and God talks to the serpent. And he goes, "You will strike his heel, and he will crush your head." We can survive a strike on our heel. Can't survive having our head crushed. So the resurrection of Jesus Christ is our final victory. And so Satan, from that point on, I've got to stop this. I've got to do something. And so we see it all through history. Hitler, he thinks, okay, I'm going to take care of the Jews. We see it, we go to the end of Genesis, and we see Joseph. Joseph is probably the second most powerful man in Egypt. He is Pharaoh's right-hand man. Joseph got sold into slavery at 17 years old by his wonderful brothers, because Joseph was, the Bible tells us, he was Jacob's favorite child. The brothers couldn't stand that, so threw him in a pit, sold him. So Joseph, through all these years, he works his way up in Egypt, and he interprets dreams for Pharaoh. And so his brothers and Jacob come back to Egypt. Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. Joseph goes to Pharaoh and says, my family's here. And Pharaoh says, I will give you the land of Goshen. And so these 66 to 70 family members of Jacob and Joseph's brothers settle in Goshen. And by how he got that land, basically, was he had instructed his brothers, when you come in front of Pharaoh, tell them you were shepherds. And so that's what they answered. Egyptians at that point was probably the pinnacle of they were the center of the universe. Science, mathematics, culture, arts, Egypt was it. They looked down their nose at shepherds. And so that's how the land of Goshen started for the Israelites. 70 people. Joseph, by faith, told his brothers, you will carry my bones to the promised land. Because Joseph knew that God was going to keep that promise. So now we go to Exodus, and we start with Moses' parents, and specifically his mother, Jochebed. Pharaoh, he sees the nation of Israel growing and growing and growing. 400 years pass. The small little 70 people are now nearing 2 million people. They are slaves to the Egyptians. They built 2 cities for Pharaoh. Pharaoh has them making bricks, building these cities. And so his first plan is, I know what I'll do. I'll make them work round the clock, just kill them with all this labor. And just I'll set up taskmasters, and they'll just beat these people. Well, the nation still grew. It's Pharaoh, I got to come up with another plan. I'll start killing babies. So he goes to, and we'll read the account. I'll have to find it here. There are 2 midwives that Pharaoh goes to. And Pharaoh says, hey, when you go in to the Hebrew women that are giving birth, if it's a boy, kill him. Their names, let me find this, Shiphrah and Puah, and I'm probably butchering those names. Pharaoh notices there's still baby boys being born and making it. So he calls these 2 women back and says, I told you to kill them. What's going on? Well, these women told Pharaoh, I mean, could you imagine the courage that it took to tell the most powerful man in the world, he's given you a job to do and you didn't do it. You come back and your answer is, you won't believe. These women are so vigorous. King James says so lively. By the time we get there, they've already given birth. Maybe, it's never okay to lie. I think I've heard that before from Larry. But the Bible tells us that God blesses these women, that he gives them houses as he gives them families. So he blessed those women for taking a stand. In your own life, have you seen someone take a stand in a very difficult situation that they chose to do the right thing and they didn't bow down to man's laws? I think we see that in our own country. There's times where hospitals are asked to do things that is totally against God's law. And we see that more and more. But God bless those two women. There wasn't enough for Pharaoh, so after he met with the women, he said, from now on, throw every baby boy that was born to the Hebrews in the Nile. So now he's on his third try to kill the baby boys born to Hebrews. By faith, Jochebed makes Moses a basket case, Miss Betty. She had a plan with Miriam, Moses' oldest sister, to put this basket with Moses in it in the Nile River because Pharaoh's daughter would be out there bathing. And she hoped that Pharaoh's daughter would find that baby and with a mother's heart have compassion. And it's exactly what happened. And just as Jochebed planned, Miriam went up and said, oh, there's a baby. You want me to find a Hebrew woman that could nurse it? Sure. So Jochebed, her plan's working to save Moses. But at that time, his name wasn't Moses. We don't know what his name was. But Pharaoh's daughter said, sure, you find someone, I'll even pay him. So it reminds you of Proverbs chapter 16, verse 7. Cindy Williams, can you look that up for me, please?
It's harder to look up on my phone than it is in a real phone. You want me to read it now?
Yes, ma'am, if you don't mind.
When the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, he causes their enemies to make peace with them.
Amazing. Here was Pharaoh wanting to kill that baby, and Jochebed had a plan to save him. And when you read that Moses was a beautiful baby, did Jochebed see something in him that something may have just said something, hey, this one's special. This one we need to take care of. I just have that thought. So, the things about God uses people all through the Bible unwittingly for his own good and for our own good. And we see that. So Moses was saved. She got to raise him for a few months. Probably it was very difficult to give it back to Pharaoh's daughter. And that's when Moses became Moses. Pharaoh's daughter said, because I have drawn you out of the water, your name will be Moses. As we find, Jim, in verse 23 and 24, Moses becomes an Egyptian. He talks like an Egyptian. He walks like an Egyptian. But Moses learned in all the ways of the Egyptians. I have no doubt that when he went to university, he was big man on campus. He was probably top of his class. Probably, I don't know what sports they played then, but he was probably the best. As he got out of college, he became a military commander. The Bible tells us he defeated the Ethiopians. And so he was, he was it. The Bible tells us he's great in words and deeds. To me, that implies that he was probably influential. He swayed people. He had a lot of charisma. And the Bible picks it up where Moses is 40 years old now. And he has it in his heart to go visit the Hebrews. And he shows up just as a taskmaster is beating one of his brethren. Moses reacts. In Moses' time, not God's time, Moses reacted and he killed the Egyptian. And what did he do with him?
Buried him in the sand.
Buried him in the sand.
Quick
But
way.
Get some dirt over him.
yeah, just, he probably left a toe exposed or something. But, he probably went home that night and thought, I got away with it. I did it. And then in Moses' mind, he started the deliverance. These people they're going to be so happy. They're going to follow me. And so, just like in our own life, when we do something we know we shouldn't, we try to cover it up. And ever since the garden, it's almost like a hiding muscle. And we probably don't develop that too well. We think we do. But God knows everything. There is nothing hidden from God. There's nothing that just all of a sudden occurs to God. So here's Moses putting his plan into action. And then the next day, he goes back to the scene of the crime. It's just like, that's why I don't jog, because you watch all these crime shows on TV, it's always a jogger finds the body, every time. And it's one of the reasons why I don't jog. But Moses goes back, and there's two Hebrews fighting. And he's just expecting that there's our guy. Moses is our guy. And so Moses goes, hey guys, don't, stop. But the two guys, who made you our boss? We saw you kill the Egyptian. Moses is like, oh my goodness. The Bible tells us he looked this way and that when he killed the Egyptian. Because he knew it was wrong what he was doing. So he looks to make sure nobody's watching. He never looks up. So Moses realizes now, I'm caught. Everybody knows. And so he's probably got, really nice clothes. What does he do? He takes off to the desert. He's probably thinking, I'm through. He found out that Pharaoh wants to kill him now. Can't have a man like that would kill an Egyptian. So he runs. The military that he was leading now wants to kill him. So he takes off through the desert. On the map, it's only that far from where he leaves to Midian. It is a desert. Linda, did y'all just go through a desert on your trip?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hot, dry. Could you imagine being a shepherd?
It was cooler there than it was here.
Okay. I believe it. And this next week is going to be miserable. Physically, I don't know if I've ever been in a desert. Spiritually, I have. We probably all, at some point in our life, have been in a desert. Moses was 40 years old, had lived a very fine life. D.L. Moody says Moses spent his first 40 years becoming a somebody. He spent the next 40 years being a nobody. His last 40 years, Steve, last 40 years, from 80 years old to 120, Moses found out what God can do with a nobody. So I'm going to tell you, this is my dad's Bible. It is held together with black duct tape. And the old saying, a Bible that's falling apart is usually reflective of a life that's not. And if you've ever been to Tuckerman, Arkansas, you wouldn't have to go very far to find the influence of Bob Stoner. He was one of the greatest leaders I ever have known in my life. I am 65 years old. It's amazing. But when COVID started, Dad got sick, and it wasn't from COVID, but he was in a rehab center. All of a sudden, you couldn't get out of a rehab center. You know, you remember all the restrictions that we had. And that strong man became weak. And growing up, especially when I got to about 10, 11 years old, Bob Stoner was the hardest man I'd ever met in my life. And from then to about 24 years old, he was the most stupid man I'd ever met in my life. He was tough. I'd be around Tuckerman, oh, you're Bob Stoner's boy. And because I wasn't Bob Jr., I was Butch in Tuckerman, Arkansas. But Dad he was just different. Your dad was so good to me. Your dad was so nice to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're talking about my dad? He's not nice. He's not nice at all. But Dad was preparing me, I know. And, you know, I think at the funeral they read basically his biography. Dad was Jackson County Man of the Year. When he retired from his first career, he became the head of the economic development in Jackson County. If you've ever been to Jackson County, there's not a lot of economic development going on. Unemployment rate was almost 12% when he took it over. Less than 5 years, it was under 5. And they were about to ready to build statues to my dad. When I graduated college, my second senior year, I wasn't exactly the best student. I realized then just how much my dad had learned in those few years. And we became best friends. Dad was my best man at my wedding. And at 65 years old, he played 54 holes of golf. Anytime I called him and we had a whole day, we would play 54 holes, and there's no way I could do that today. But he did it, simply because he wanted to spend time with me. And that was, to me, that was the best leader I'd ever seen lived under the example. 1 year after Dad went to the rehab center, we only saw him twice. I had calls every day from him. Sometimes I'm on the road a lot, so 30 minutes to an hour. First 10, 15 minutes was about the St. Louis Cardinals, and the rest of the time was about the Apostle Paul. My dad loved the Apostle Paul, and you can tell by his Bible. Dad passed away that March, the next March, and a day after my birthday. And I went to the desert. Before Dad passed away, Sydney was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And I could hide it well, but I was so weak. I was here on Sunday. I was here, but I wasn't really here, you know, because Sydney is so much like Bob Stoner. Gosh. And we have those times that Bob Stoner was stubborn. What I learned at Dad's funeral, 2 of his pallbearers came to know Christ because Bob Stoner witnessed to them, one for over 20 years. There's probably not a house in Tuckerman that Dad has not knocked on that door and said, let me tell you about my Jesus. I know I have that legacy, but during that time going through it, I didn't understand what God was doing. I was angry. Rob would tell me, hey, if you ever want somebody to yell with, come down here and I'll yell with you. And I don't know if you heard me from my house, but there was a few times I yelled. Shortly after we buried Dad, Mom had a stroke, and it was devastating. Mark left, and it's going to make it easier to talk about this. I'm a very emotional person, so let me get through this. Mark Stitch comes to me that November, 2 months after Sydney had been diagnosed, a few months after Dad was gone from us, and Mom had had a stroke. And he goes, I want you to go to a fish fry with me. And it's on a Friday night, come up to the church and do that. And I was introduced to MD5. And I know that Roger and Steve, as they were putting together the curriculum, probably never once thought this will basically save their life. And we started MD5 that January, I believe it was, Reggie, every Thursday morning at 6 o'clock. And what I found through that, through Nathan and Nick and Joe and Warren and Paul and Reggie and Paul Hopp, we had 2 Pauls in there, that everyone is going through something. At some point in our life, we're going through something. And that, I know that second or third Thursday, I just went home, locked my office door, got on my knees. It's yours. And it took coming to the end of myself. Ethan preached this morning about coming to the end of ourselves. And the selfish life gets us nowhere. And we create so many problems. Moses reacted in his own time. And that's what I was doing for several years, just reacting. And it's like, and Bobby can mess it up, or Butch, can mess it up so well, so badly, however you want to term it. But when you give it to God, He's the fixer. Moses comes to the end of himself in the desert. There's not many wells in the desert, but Moses is sitting by a well in Midian, and God's about to get a hold of his life. And I'm looking at the clock. Is that right? That's not right. Oh, we got to go home. I am so sorry, guys. Oh, we are right there. Hal, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're supposed to have been long gone. But Moses gets to marry Zipporah. He meets his future father-in-law, Jethro. Jethro becomes very influential because he shows up later and he helps Moses delegate. Because Moses is now learning to become a leader that God would use. And he had to empty himself to where God can use him. And we have to do the same for God. God will do it. We just need to be the vessel. So there are so many things I want to finish, but hey, that's 5 years from now, Larry, I'll do it. But Larry, thank you. Thank you for this class. Thank you for each person that's ever prayed. And I will tell you this, we can take it off the prayer list. My son-in-law is home Friday night or Saturday morning at 1:30. Rylan and my daughter meet him in Kentucky, and they're on their way to Fort Bragg right now to process a lot of things. But thank you for the prayers. He is home. So just make ourselves available for God, and God will take care of it. So thank you all so much for listening. I'm so sorry we ran over. Joey, would you dismiss us, please?